Hi, this is Scott Bradfield. This is the latest overproduced episode of Reading Great Books in the Bathtub. We're doing a second episode on one of my favorite novels, Vineland, by Thomas Pynchon, a book which has always been unfairly disregarded. I don't understand. Almost everything they tell you about Pynchon is wrong. The books that everyone says is really important, they're really boring, and all the books they think aren't very important are really great books. Vineland's a beautiful book. I'm going to keep making that case here today. I won't do too much more than maybe just read a few passages that I love, help you understand a bit of the plot, because like all Pynchon plots, it starts somewhere and then it goes a bunch of other places, and it kind of comes back. Most books come back to where they started, and Pynchon almost always goes somewhere else. You can almost remember at the end of that massive Against the Day where the balloon of adventure just disappears, and he's always taking these steps off into the ether. I wanted to remind you and myself some of the plots of Vineland. Again, it's about these two different cultures. He's writing about America through the 60s and through the 80s. And while this is published in 89, he's clearly thinking about 84, Reagan. And Reagan coming in, and not only coming in with all this old bullshit and all this evil rubbish, but actually people buying it, which is the part I remember as being a pretty horrifying part of 1984. And even today, that step that America took with that clown has just led us into so much rubbish since then, particularly the Democratic Party. I won't get into this, but Pynchon is talking about how a certain kind of countercultural life and adventure and a sense of changing this screwed up country and trying to make things better and to overcome this awful Nixonian mess and this terrible weapons industry, which eventually just devoured our country. And finding an alternative way of living, which is these kind of heads and crazies and revolutionaries running around with strange names. I can never remember Pynchon's names. And what's happened is in the 60s, there's this kind of counterculture revolution, which basically Nixon sends in all the CIA and the COINTELPRO type stuff, and they basically shut them down through co-opting them. So they, as you see in this book, they hire a lot of them to be narcs, to turn in their friends as drug dealers. And then they get into a situation where the central story of Vineland is about Zoid losing his wife. He marries a woman named Frenese Gates. And Frenese, he meets her just after she's escaped this nightmare with the CIA and Brockvand. And that story is really the story of the College of the Surf, is really the center and the heart of this book. The College of the Surf it's set in Pynchon has his own California landscape. So just like Vineland is set somewhere up in Humboldt and up where the drug growers and all the heads are living, the College of the Surf is sort of taking place down somewhere like it looks like Orange County in Irvine. But Irvine, I don't even think existed in the 60s, or was barely existing. And it's a kind of an imaginary university, College of the Surf, and a bunch of kind of revolutionaries take it over. A guy named Weed Ottman. They all these names. Weed Ottman is this professor, and they try to set up their own communal life out of this university, and all these heads come gravitating there. It's like this giant Woodstock, or this giant event that all these people are going to finally, create their own culture. And in the course of it, Frenese is a movie maker. She belongs to the group called 24 FPS, 24 feet per second. And we get this all in this kind of long flashback. So these long, lengthy streams of flashback come because Frenese's daughter is searching for her mother. And she gets these stories from the people who know her. And in the course of these 60s radicals running around, Frenese makes this film. And the way this film is made is fascinating because as she goes out there with some friends and they're trying to make the rawness and the beauty of all these events. And while they're making the film, Brockvand and the CIA come in and start guiding the shots. That's basically what happens. They start to take over this movie, and the way the movie captures that scene and how that represents the scene. And in doing it, Brock and Farnese have this sexual kind of frenzy between the two of them, and Farnese becomes caught up in the CIA's version of life and reality. And in the course of it, they basically kill this kind of icon, this Weed Ottman. Now, as a result of these people who really believed in life in the 60s and 70s, and really believed in new life and new worlds and new opportunities, what happens to them is they become these zombies called the Thanatoids. And I know people who don't think this is funny, but I think it's a hilarious part of the book. The Thanatoids are people who just watch television. So they'll often be, humming Gilligan's Island, and they'll be, talking about the Mod Squad and all that real reactionary crap, because that's what really 60s American television was, just reactionary crap. Everyone living it was happy with these families that didn't exist, and the cops are the heroes of all the shows, the cops, and you got the dragnets who, everybody who has long hair is a drug dealer. And that whole death of this life that occurred in the 60s for Pynchon and for his characters is an emblematic, is made a metaphor by these Thanatoids who, like Weed Ottman, this countercultural hero, who dies and becomes a member of the Thanatoids and goes off and lives in the woods with all the other Thanatoids. I'm going to read one scene, which is pretty funny. So that image of what happened to these people in the 60s and now in the 80s, as Reagan comes along, and all Reagan really starts to do is start to say, well, look, we won, and now we're going to cut back. So all these programs, all these kind of, well-funded CIA programs of paying off narcs and keeping them on payrolls, they actually start taking their money away. And so Farnese, who's been living off this money, they're starting to cut her funds. And, again, all through it, Pynchon is really describing the total decimation of our culture. He does it all the time in his book, but really, really prescient as far as where it's taking us. And he doesn't bore us with it, because it's some beautiful storytelling. I want to read a couple passages, because he writes a lot. He writes really well about California, and this is about a Southern California place where they're all hiding out. I think it's Southern California, and he will do this north-south divide, the heads and the Reaganites, and the north and the south of California. We get this really conservative Southern California, which is just all tract housing and weapons industry, and you'll have this kind of more free, or more beautiful, more loose, druggy characters up north. And he invents it and twists it out into his own shapes. I want to give a little example here, just the way almost every paragraph about LA is lovely, about Farnese going out trying to cash her latest check, because she can't go anywhere to cash her checks because the banks basically have taken over everything. So here's this page 90. She drove on downtown, being extra careful because she felt like doing harm to somebody. Found a liquor store with a big checks cash sign, got the same turn down inside. Running on nerves and anger, she kept on till she reached the next supermarket, and this time she was told to wait while somebody went in back and made a phone call. It was there, gazing down a long aisle of frozen food, out past the checkout stands, and into the terminal black glow of the front windows, that she found herself entering a moment of undeniable clairvoyance, rare in her life, but recognized. She understood that the Reaganomic axe blades were swinging everywhere, that she and Flash were no longer exempt, might easily be abandoned already to the upper world and any unfinished business in it that might now resume. As if they'd been kept safe in some time-free zone all these years, but now, at the unreadable whim of something in power, must re-enter the clockwork of cause and effect. Someplace there would be a real axe, or something just as painful, Jasonic, Halloween movies, Jasonic, blade to meet final. But at the distance, she, Flash, and Justin had by now been brought to. It would all be done with keys on alphanumeric keyboards that stood for weightless, invisible chains of electronic presence or absence, the computers that were going to turn everybody into abstractions of money. If patterns of ones and zeros were like patterns of human lives and deaths, if everything about an individual could be represented in a computer record by a long string of ones and zeros, then what kind of creature would be represented by a long string of lives and deaths? It would have to be one level at least, up one level. An angel, a minor god, something in a UFO. It would take 8 human lives and deaths just to form one character in this being's name. Its complete dossier might take up a considerable piece of the history of the world. We are digits in God's computer, she not so much thought as hummed to herself to a sort of standard gospel tune. And the only thing we're good for, to be dead or to be living, is the only thing he sees. What we cry, what we contend for in our world of toil and blood, it all lies beneath the notice of the hacker we call God. The night manager came back, holding the check as he might a used disposable diaper. They stopped payment on this. The banks are closed. How'd they do that? It's at night, so they stopped the payment while the banks are closed. He spent his work life here explaining reality to the herds of computer illiterate who crowded in and out of the store. The computer, he began gently once again, never has to sleep or even go take a break. It's like it's open 24 hours a day. So these eyes and these control mechanisms are now always running. And again, he's writing this 89. One of the things that you have to read the book out loud, all these late great books of Pynchon, and I do feel I want to do this maybe in the future, is the earlier books are these kind of control freak images, and the ideas are all just jammed into these sentences. And reading them is really hard. There's not really a rhythm to them. But if you can hear, you have to hear the rhythms in these sentences. And he's going off on little flights, almost every sentence 2 or 3 times, that have a logic that works through the rhythm and the music of the words. And it's one of his most beautifully written books. And it reminds me a great deal of Inherent Vice, which is also wonderful. I want to read one more passage. Where's all my notes? We really need a producer. We need a better producer on this show. One of the things the whole story is about how this life that people lived in the 60s and the 70s has just been forgotten. And that's why the Thanatoids can sit staring at the television, and our generation, and I'm part of it, staring at our damn computers and our phones, and and I'm part of it already doing this. And the thing you can get out of a book, which is you could shut all that stuff off. And he's talking about how people just plug into this rubbish that they're getting in the television, and they forget everything. And that's what Farnese starts talking about, is how these CIA people start putting on Thorazine and all this stuff, and they start muting all that reality and the painful reality of what she lost and what she gave into, that she helped them kill this man who was basically a good and exciting person. I want to look. 219. There's a passage on 219. I'm just going to read a little bit. And this is the Thanatoids, and it's hilarious. There's a huge section where we're in the Thanatoids' home out in the woods of Vineland. And there's just a few jokes. He makes up his own jokes, Pynchon, and they all work, and they all take a little thinking. You have to. They all hit you sometimes like a little later, like a few seconds after you hear them. And they're having a big party where they do like friars roasts and whatever crap they see on Johnny Carson or television. They do. Their life is watching and reliving things they see on TV. And here's their big party. It goes. What an evening! They told obscure but rib-tickling Thanatoid jokes. They twitted one another for taking inordinate lengths of Earth time to clean up relatively penny-ante karmic business. Thanatoid wives bravely did their part to complicate further already tangled marriage histories by flirting with waiters, bus persons, and even other Thanatoids. Everyone drank and smoked furiously, and the menu featured the usual low-end fare, heavy on sugar, starch, salt, ambiguous about where the meat had come from, including which animal, accompanied by bushels of French fries and barrels of shakes. Dessert was a horrible, pale, chunky pudding, There was sparkling wine, to be sure, but all clues to its origin had been blacked out with felt-tip marker at some unknown stage in its perhaps not even entirely legal journey. As more of this was drunk, Thanatoids grew less shy about lurching up to the mic and reciting insult testimonials to the roastee or making with the quips. What do you call a Thanatoid with Sir in front of his name? Night of the Living Dead. Night, K-N-I-G. Night of the Living Dead. How many Thanatoids it take to screw in a light bulb? None. It gets too hot in there. Think about it. What does a Thanatoid do on Halloween? Puts a fruit bowl on his head, 2 straws up his nose, and goes as a zombie. You got to think about that. I think you have to think about that one for a few seconds. Maybe it's just me. I think that's a hilarious passage. And there is 1 or 2 more things too. 66. The end of this whole story of Frenzy and the 24 FPS and the death of Weed Atman and how she basically gets put in a mental institution, and her friend D.L. Chastain, who's the ninjette, who's the mistress of the vibrating palm. She has a power that she studied some sort of martial arts where she could put her palm on you and it kills you 2 years later. D.L. helps her get away and she runs off. And there's a little passage here where D.L. kind of drives off because she was in love with Frenzy. Everybody's in love with Frenzy. I guess she's this beautiful, kind of exciting person. And she ends up basically in witness protection the rest of her life. And as D.L. drives off, there's a nice little passage as we kind of see the end of this central narrative of the book. And it goes like this on page 266. So the bad Ninja Mobile swept along on the Great Ventura among Olympic visitors from everywhere. This is set during when the Olympics are going on in L.A. Okay, and listen to how he gets this image of the light going on in here. So the bad Ninja Mobile swept along on the Great Ventura among Olympic visitors from everywhere who teemed all over the freeway system in midday densities till far into the night, shined up, screaming black motorcades that could have carried any of several office seekers, cruisers heading for treed and more gently roaring boulevards, huge double and triple trailer rigs that loved to find Volkswagens laboring up grades and go sashaying around them gracefully at gnats' ass tolerances, plus flirters, deserters, wimps and pimps, speeding like bullets, grinning like chimps above the heads of TV watchers, lovers under the overpasses, movies at malls letting out, bright gas station oases in pure fluorescent spill, canopied beneath the palm trees, soon wrapped down the corridors of the surface streets in nocturnal smog, the adobe air, the smell of distant fireworks, the spilled, the broken world. That is one of the best things I've seen written about LA, just the adobe air. He loves and hates LA like anyone who's been there in Southern California. I think that's all I wanted to talk about today. Again, what the other thing that he's talking about in here, and he's really right. He's just saying all these guys, these characters running the government, these characters that are running the Reagan type and Nixon type world, who were babies compared to the clowns we got doing things now. They're basically practicing how to control populations that they don't like, and setting up and seeing what they can do with them, and how they can just simply dispose of them. You're seeing that now all the time, and much more out in the open. And and Pynchon is railing about it, and at the same time never forgetting all this stuff he loves about all these characters, because it's first and foremost a loving book. It's a book full of love and passion for almost every phrase of experience. It's like these long sweeping kind of Kerouac style sentences, but far more explicit and clear than any Kerouac sentence, and all that materiality and physicality of the world, and almost a fistful of poetry in like every phrase. Okay, I'm gonna do one last one on this book and try to just wrap it up. But I, again, encourage you to read it. I don't think my summary will spoil any of it for you. And go read a wonderful book. Okay, there it is. Get the paper. The hardcover looks the paperback looks crap. It's a horrible paperback. That's a nice cover. You can get this cheap online. Okay,